Let's start with our Reserve Bank and its independence. Speak to the Treasurer or any politician and the independence of the central bank, they say, is sacrosanct. But right now, though, questions are being raised about the independence of Western central banks by no less potentially than the next US president.
The Federal Reserve is a very interesting thing, and it's sort of gotten it wrong a lot. And he's tending to be a little bit late on things. He gets a little bit too early and a little bit too late. And, you know, that's very largely it's a gut feeling. I believe it's really a gut feeling. And I used to have it out with him. I had it out with him a couple of times very strongly. I fought him very hard. And, you know, we get along fine. We get along fine. But I feel the president should have at least say in there. Yeah, I feel that strongly. I think that in my case, I made a lot of money. I was very successful. And I think I have a better instinct than, in many cases, people that would be on the Federal Reserve or the chairman.
So that's a big call. And immediately he was backed by his would-be vice president.
I absolutely agree with what he said.
Right now, the president doesn't have a say.
Well, the president has a say in the sense that the president appoints the Federal Reserve governors. But he's saying, to be clear, President Trump is saying, I think, something that's really important and actually profound, which is that the political leadership of this country should have more say over the monetary policy of this country. I agree with him.
Kamala Harris, for one, is not having it at all.
Can you give us a sense on what your view is on the Fed and independence of the Fed? President Trump weighed in on that list last week and said he thought he should have some say in the Fed's decisions.
I couldn't disagree more strongly. The Fed is an independent entity, and as president, I would never interfere in the decisions that the Fed makes.
And the Fed chairman, Jerome Powell, was asked directly about this a month ago at a Senate hearing.
Give me your perspective, at least, on why the central bank independence is so critically important.
Thank you. I'd be glad to. So essentially all advanced economies have adopted a policy of central bank and operational independence. And that just means that we make our decisions. We're instructed to make them without taking in extraneous factors, one of which would be politics. And the record is pretty clear that that's a good it's a good institutional arrangement that serves the public well. And, you know, we just want to stress, as we do periodically, that this is an institutional choice that we make as a country, and that as long as it's seen to serve the public well, it's a good choice. We think so.
And there's a bit of irony here because the vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance, was on that very committee. Now, though the tone of this argument in Australia is not quite as blunt, this week, senior Labor figures were pretty frank in their assessment of what would happen if the Reserve Bank raised interest rates in its ongoing fight against inflation.
The RBA is independent, but that doesn't mean that they're immune from being disagreed with. I do not believe the economy is running hot for most Australians. There are some Australians who are doing very well, but for most Australians, we're seeing their savings being reduced, we're seeing the cost of living pressures. The way to deal with it, though, isn't to push this nation into recession with higher and higher interest rates.
Jawboning or just a bit of advice? Well, that was nothing compared with the former Labor Minister, Stephen Connery, when he was asked about the Bank of England import to the Reserve Bank, Andrew Houser, the Deputy Governor, who merely noted that future rate movements would be determined by economic data, of which the RBA is not completely certain about right now.
The type of inflation that we're facing today is not restaurant spending by the lowest 40% of Australians. So get a grip, admit you're wrong, stop being a complete wanker, and actually study the Australian statistics. Because this bloke's record from the UK is he helped push it into recession.